Your mouth is not just a tool for communication, it's a weapon for influence. The way you speak can open doors or close them forever. Leadership doesn't start with a title, it starts with your tongue. Speak like a leader and people will follow you even without a nameplate. But speak like a follower and even your title won't save you. Some people don't lack power, they lack presence, they don't lack wisdom, they lack words. And they wonder why the room doesn't shift when they walk in. It's because they never learned how to command respect with their speech. I'm going to show you how to speak like a true leader, not with manipulation, not with fear, but with clarity, conviction, and confidence. Let's go speak with vision, not just vocabulary. When you open your mouth, the world listens to what's inside your mind. But when you speak with vision, the world sees what's inside your future. There's a massive difference between having vocabulary and having vision. Vocabulary is what you know. Vision is what you believe. Most people talk a lot, but they say nothing. They fill the air with information, yet they never shift the atmosphere. Why? Because they're speaking from memory, not from imagination. They speak about what is, but never about what could be. A true leader doesn't just describe the present. They define the future. They don't just say what they see. They speak what they want to see. That's vision. When a leader opens their mouth, they paint pictures with their words. They turn fear into faith, confusion into clarity, and frustration into focus. That's why vision is magnetic. It pulls people out of the pit and places them on a path. Vocabulary can impress people, but only vision will move them. Have you ever sat in a room where someone is speaking and you feel like you're being transported? You feel lifted, awakened, challenged, like something in your spirit got activated. That's not because of fancy words. That's the effect of vision being transferred. A leader speaks and suddenly people feel like they can fly, like they can win, like they were born for more. That's not emotion, that's inspiration. And it always starts with vision. When Martin Luther King Jr. said, "I have a dream," he wasn't giving a speech. He was transferring a vision. He wasn't quoting statistics or explaining policy. He was igniting imagination. He was planting a picture inside people's minds of what was possible. And decades later, those words still move nations. Why? Because vision is timeless. Vocabulary has an expiration date, but vision is eternal. Now let's bring this home. You're in a staff meeting. Your team is behind on a project. You can stand up and say, "We're falling short. We have to do better. We need to fix these errors." That's vocabulary. That's stating facts. But what if instead you said, "Listen, I know we're behind, but I also know what this team is capable of. I've seen what we can do when we lock in. This isn't just a deadline. This is an opportunity to make our mark. Let's shock them with our comeback. Let's lead with excellence. Let's be the standard." Now, TIAT is vision. It uplifts, it challenges, it redirects energy. That kind of speech doesn't just inform people, it transforms them. It calls them into something higher. Because here's the truth, people don't follow explanations, they follow expectations. And expectations are created through vision. Your personal life is no different. Maybe you're in a relationship and things are getting rocky. You sit down to talk and you can say, "Why argue too much?" You don't listen. "I'm tired of repeating myself." That's vocabulary. But a visionary will say, "I still believe in us. I believe we can grow from this. I believe there's more ahead than there is behind." But we have to start speaking to each other with respect. Let's build again. See the difference? One complains, the other commands. One points fingers, the other points forward. That's the power of vision. It doesn't escape problems, but it rises above them. Think about athletes. Coaches don't just train their bodies. Before a big game, the coach doesn't say, "Let's try not to lose too badly." No, they say, "You've prepared, you've sacrificed, you've got what it takes. Go out there and play like you already own the victory." That's not hype, that's vision. And it makes a difference in how people show up. Even in parenting, the most powerful words you can say to a child are not rules, they are visions. "I see greatness in you. I see creativity. I see someone who will lead others." That's how you raise confident children. You don't just correct their behavior, you speak to their potential. Let's go deeper. There's a reason the most respected speakers, the most impactful leaders, and the most followed voices all have one thing in common. They never leave you where you are. They always lift you to where you could be. They speak with purpose, passion, and precision. They're not just talking, they're planting seeds. They're not just delivering messages, they're delivering meaning, and you feel it. You can't ignore it. This is what separates average voices from influential ones. This is what makes a person unforgettable. You don't remember the exact words, you remember the picture they painted in your mind. You remember the energy they transferred. You remember how they made you believe again. So the next time you speak, whether it's on a stage, in a boardroom, in a relationship, or in the mirror, don't just talk. Don't just repeat vocabulary, tap into your vision. Ask yourself, what do I want to awaken in the people listening to me? Then speak from that place. Speak with imagination. Speak with belief. Speak with faith in the unseen. Speak like someone who's seen the finish line even when others are stuck at the start. Because when you speak with vision, you don't just sound like a leader. You become one. Use silence like a weapon. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strategy. Silence is not the absence of power. It is the control of it. The loudest person in the room is not always the most powerful. In fact, the person who knows when not to speak often holds the most influence. Most people believe that to lead, they must always be talking, always explaining, defending, justifying. But true leaders understand something deeper. Timing matters. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is absolutely nothing. In a world that is addicted to noise, to talking, posting, shouting, tweeting, silence has become rare. And what's rare becomes valuable. Let me tell you this, people lean in when silence enters the room. Silence creates tension. Silence demands attention. When a leader goes silent in the middle of a sentence or pauses before a response, people don't look away, they lean in. Their ears stretch forward, their hearts pause. Because the mind is wired to chase what is unfinished. Think about the courtroom. The most intense moment is not when the lawyer is yelling or when evidence is being thrown around. It's the moment when the judge leans forward and says nothing. That stillness, that quiet makes the whole room freeze. That's authority. That's controlled power. And that's what you carry when you learn to use silence like a weapon. Most people fill silence with insecurity. They get nervous when there's a pause. They rush to speak, to explain, to overexpress. But leaders understand that silence is part of the sentence. It's not a mistake, it's a method. Just like music needs rests between notes to sound beautiful, leadership needs silence to give your words weight. If you talk nonstop, people get used to the sound of your voice and stop listening. But if you pause, if you let your silence echo, people feel the impact of every word you do speak. You ever notice how the most powerful speeches have rhythm? It's not just what they say, it's how they space what they say. Martin Luther King Jr., Barack Obama, Nelson Mandela, they didn't rush. They placed their words like bricks, carefully, strategically, and the silence between their words made every sentence feel sacred. Their pauses weren't empty, they were loaded with presence. You could feel the weight of what wasn't said just as much as what was. Let me make this practical. You're in a meeting. Someone criticizes your idea unfairly. Most people would jump in, defend themselves immediately, raise their tone, throw words around to fight back. But a leader will look, breathe, and wait. That 2 seconds of pause, that's when the room starts shifting. That's when people start paying attention. That's when power enters the atmosphere. Then, when you finally respond calmly, clearly, deliberately, your words cut sharper than a knife. Not because they were loud, but because they were measured. Or think about parenting. Your child breaks a rule. You're angry. Most parents yell immediately. But the most powerful moment isn't when you scream, it's when you go silent. You look at them, you say nothing. That silence pierces deeper than yelling ever could. Why? Because silence carries emotion in a concentrated form. It creates anticipation. And in that anticipation, hearts become open. Even in business negotiation, silence is golden. You've stated your offer. The other person counters. Don't rush. Don't blurt. Let silence hang in the air. That moment of pause shows strength. It says, I don't need to fill this space to prove myself. It says, I'm comfortable with power. I'm not afraid of the unknown, and people respect that. You ever see a lion in the wild? It doesn't make noise when it's hunting. It moves in silence. It studies, it watches, it calculates. And when it strikes, it's over in a second. No warning, no announcement, just power. That's what silence teaches you. It teaches you how to observe before you speak, how to watch the room, how to pick your moment. Because not every moment is meant for talking. Some moments are meant for listening, for absorbing, for calculating. Some of your greatest breakthroughs will not come from what you say, but from what you withhold. It's not always wise to reveal everything you know. Leaders have restraint. They know when to hold their tongue, not because they're afraid, but because they understand timing is everything. You can say the right thing at the wrong time and lose your influence. But if you wait, if you pause, if you listen before you speak, your words will arrive with precision. Let this sink in. Silence doesn't weaken your presence. It amplifies it. It shows mastery over your emotions. It gives your words room to breathe, and it makes every sentence stand taller. Silence is not the absence of speech, it is the presence of control. So the next time you enter a room, don't feel pressure to speak first. Watch, breathe, listen, let others talk. Then, when you speak, your words will sound like answers in a room full of noise. Don't just speak to the ears, speak to the spirit. Most people speak to be heard, but very few speak to be felt. They throw words at people's ears, hoping something sticks, but nothing moves. Why? Because they're speaking to the surface, not the soul. They're aiming for attention instead of transformation. And let me tell you something powerful. When you learn to speak to the spirit of a person, you don't just make them think, you make them believe. You don't just touch their ears, you awaken their fire. That is what separates a speaker from a leader. Leaders speak to the core. There's something deeper than motivation, something more profound than good advice. It's called impartation. It's when your words stop sounding like information and start feeling like direction. It's when people don't just hear you, they feel like you're calling something alive inside them that was asleep. That's when people sit up straight. That's when tears rise without permission. That's when goosebumps hit without warning, because something inside them whispers, this was meant for me. Speaking to the Spirit is not about using big words. It's about using true ones. It's not about sounding wise. It's about being real. It's when your voice becomes a mirror showing people who they really are, not who life told them to be. And you know what? People are tired of hearing what they should do. What they crave is someone who reminds them of what they were born for. People are drowning in opinions. What they need is a voice that speaks with clarity, conviction, and purpose. That's what a leader's voice brings. Let me show you how this plays out in real life. Imagine someone walking through a tough season, discouraged, disappointed, ready to quit. You could say, stay positive, everything will work out. That sounds nice, but it doesn't penetrate. Now watch the shift when you speak to the Spirit. I know the weight you're carrying is heavy. I know the silence in your nights is louder than any crowd. But I also know this: pressure doesn't come to destroy diamonds. It comes to reveal them. And what you're facing right now is the proof that there's something in you the world hasn't seen yet. So stand, even if you have to shake. Stand, because you're carrying something sacred. You feel that? That's not just talk. That's fire. That's transformation. That's impact. When you speak to the Spirit, your words carry a frequency that intellect can't argue with. Logic might try to resist it, but the heart surrenders to it, because the heart knows truth when it hears it, and the Spirit knows its name when it's being called. That's why someone can hear thousands of speeches and forget them all, but never forget the one sentence that felt like their soul was being spoken to. There was a woman I once met who had lost everything: her job, her family, her identity. She sat in the back of a room while a speaker gave a long, structured, logical presentation about overcoming hardship. She didn't move. Her eyes were blank. But at the end, the speaker paused, looked around, and said one unscripted line: even broken things still carry value. That one line, not rehearsed, not polished, cracked something open in her. That wasn't for the ears, that was for the spirit. You see, it's not about being impressive, it's about being intentional. A leader doesn't need a stage to speak life. A leader speaks in the hallway, in the kitchen, in the car, and their words still carry weight. You could be talking to your child, your coworker, your friend, and with one sentence, you remind them of their worth. One sentence, you shift their thinking. One sentence, and the darkness starts to lift. And here's the secret to speak to someone else's spirit. You must first be connected to your own. You have to speak from a deep place. You can't lead from a shallow heart. That's why your private battles matter. Your pain becomes your platform. Your scars become your strength. People don't trust perfect voices. They trust real ones. When you've been through the fire and still have your voice, that's when people lean in. That's when people say, there's something different about the way they speak. I don't just hear them, I feel them. Speaking to the Spirit means you're not performing, you're pouring. You're not seeking applause. You're seeking alignment. You want the listener to walk away not with your name in their mind, but with their purpose reignited. Because when you speak to the Spirit, you don't need a microphone. You don't need a stage. Your words carry presence, and presence creates change. So next time you speak, whether it's to one person or 1,000, don't just aim for their ears. Don't just sound wise or professional. Go deeper. Speak to that part of them that still hopes. Speak to the dream that almost died. Speak to the voice inside them that says, I was made for more. Speak to their royalty. Speak to their resilience. Speak to the fire, not the fear. Because when your words find the Spirit, the whole person rises. Control your tone. It's louder than your words. Your tone is your temperature. It tells people what atmosphere they just walked into. It's louder than your words, stronger than your vocabulary, and it leaves a longer impression than your entire message. You can say all the right things with all the wrong energy and still lose the room. Because people don't just listen to what you say, they feel how you say it. And let me tell you something, the world doesn't follow noise, it follows clarity. The world doesn't respect shouting, it respects composure under fire. You ever been in a conversation where someone said something completely reasonable, but their tone made you feel attacked? They didn't curse, they didn't yell, but their energy slapped your soul. That's the power of tone. It invades people's space before your logic does. It builds or breaks respect before a single fact is understood. Tone is the invisible handshake. It's what people hear between your words. You can be offering help, but if your tone carries pride, you just insulted someone. You can be correcting someone for their growth, but if your tone is angry, they'll feel condemned, not coached. You can be saying, I believe in you, but if your tone carries frustration, they'll hear, you've disappointed me. That's how powerful it is. In leadership, Tone is your signature. When you enter a room, your tone speaks before you even open your mouth. Is your tone sharp? People will brace for impact. Is your tone condescending? People will close their ears. Is your tone calm, controlled, intentional? Then people lean in, they listen, they open up. Because tone creates trust or destroys it. You see, real leaders are thermostats, not thermometers. A thermometer reacts to the room. A thermostat sets the room. Most people match energy. Leaders manage it. You walk into chaos. You stay composed. You get challenged publicly. You don't raise your voice. You raise your presence. You don't have to overpower people with volume when your tone already commands attention. That's what makes people say there's something different about them. Let me give you a real life example. Imagine two managers giving feedback to an employee who made a mistake. Manager A says, "You really messed up. What were you thinking?" With a harsh tone. Manager B says, "Let's walk through what happened. I want to make sure you succeed." With a calm, firm tone, same goal, correction. But only one will be respected. Only one creates growth, because tone builds a bridge or burns it. Think of the most influential leaders you've ever listened to. They didn't scream to be heard. They didn't rush to speak. Their tone had weight. Even when they raised their voice, it had intention, not insecurity. Their tone didn't beg for respect, it expected it. You could feel the authority, not just in what they said, but in how they said it. You want to know how powerful tone is. It can save or destroy a relationship. One apology in the right tone can heal 10 years of pain. One compliment in the wrong tone can still sound like mockery. You might say, "I love you," but if your tone is cold, it feels like a transaction. You might say, "I'm proud of you," but if your tone is distracted, it lands like an obligation. Tone is everything. You ever been in a customer service situation where the representative said all the right phrases, but their tone screamed, "I don't care"? That's the gap between compliance and compassion. That's the difference between being heard and being valued. When your tone aligns with your intention, people don't just understand you, they believe you. And let me speak to the leaders in high-pressure environments. The more intense the situation, the more controlled your tone must be. You might be under fire, but your tone must stay focused. People are watching, not for perfection, but for stability. If you crack, they collapse. If you stay grounded, they rise with you. That's why self-mastery is the first classroom of leadership. You have to conquer your own emotions before you try to lead others through theirs. Think about a pilot in turbulence. They don't scream through the intercom, "No, we're going down." No, their voice stays calm. Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing some slight turbulence. Please remain seated and fasten your seatbelt. The tone is the anchor. The tone says, "I've got this." The tone says, "We're not out of control." That's what great leaders do. They become the calm in the storm by controlling the temperature of their voice. So ask yourself, what does my tone carry? Frustration or focus? Anxiety or assurance? Condescension or compassion? Power or panic? Because your tone is what people will remember when your words are long forgotten. Your tone tells the truth of your spirit. It reveals your self-control. It shows if you're leading from a wound or from wisdom. The most powerful people in any room don't need to raise their voice to raise the standard. Their tone does the heavy lifting. Their presence makes people adjust. Their voice, measured, steady, intentional, becomes a mirror of authority. They're not loud, but they're listened to. They're not aggressive, but they're unforgettable. Because when your tone aligns with your leadership, you don't just speak to people, you shape them. Speak to solve, not to impress. Most people speak because they want to be admired. They want the room to clap, nod, or say, "Wow, that's deep." But the problem is, admiration doesn't always equal transformation. You can impress people with your vocabulary and still leave them stuck. You can drop 10 powerful quotes and still not change one person's life. Why? Because you were aiming to sound smart, not to be useful. You spoke to be remembered, not to be relied on. You delivered a performance, not a solution. And that's the difference between a speaker and a leader. A leader doesn't speak to impress, they speak to solve. You ever walk into a room with questions but leave with even more confusion? That's because someone gave you fireworks but not firewood. They gave you sparkle but not structure. They made you clap, but they didn't make you move. And in this world, there are too many voices chasing applause and not enough that offer answers. People don't need more entertainment, they need direction. People are drowning in noise. What they're hungry for is clarity. And clarity doesn't come from showing off. It comes from slowing down and solving something. Look at your daily life. Think about how many conversations you've had where someone poured out a problem and the person responding made it about themselves. They said, "Yeah, that happened to me too." Or, "Let me tell you what I did," without ever really listening. That's what happens when you speak to impress. You hijack the moment to be the center of it. You say things that sound powerful, but they don't land because the person wasn't looking for admiration, they were looking for answers. When a leader speaks to solve, they slow the moment down. They don't rush to sound clever. They listen to understand, not to reply. They study the pain before they offer the prescription. That's the kind of voice that earns respect. That's the kind of presence that causes people to say, they didn't just talk, they helped. You want to make people respect you. Don't show them how smart you are. Show them how useful you can be. Let your value do the talking. Speak with purpose, not performance. I remember a man who ran a successful company, but his team was falling apart. People were quitting. Productivity was dropping. And in his frustration, he started giving long motivational talks every Monday morning. They were full of quotes, stories, high energy words, but nothing changed. One day, someone finally said to him, "We don't need another speech. We need a solution." That hit him. He realized he was performing, not leading. He was impressing, not impacting. So he shifted. He stopped trying to sound wise and started asking real questions. What's blocking you? What's frustrating you? What's one thing I can do to support your work better? And everything started changing. Why? Because he stopped aiming to sound right and started trying to make things right. Let me tell you something powerful. Real leaders are remembered not for how they spoke, but for what they solved. People follow problem solvers, not public speakers. You want to lead? Solve a problem nobody else is willing to touch. Walk into the chaos and bring clarity. Listen to the complaint and extract a plan. Let your voice be a toolbox, not a talent show. In your own life, you don't need a title to do this. Every day, you have opportunities to speak like a leader. A friend is discouraged. Don't just say, "You've got this." Ask them what's draining them. A colleague is overwhelmed. Don't say, "Hang in there." Help them reprioritize. Solve something small, and you'll earn the right to speak to something bigger. And remember, solving doesn't always mean having all the answers. Sometimes the solution is your presence. Sometimes it's your silence. Sometimes it's your ability to ask the right question that unlocks someone else's breakthrough. I once sat in a room where someone shared their dream and everyone clapped. But the one person who asked, "What's your first step and what's blocking you from taking it?" became the most respected voice in the room. Why? Because applause fades, but solutions stick. That question shifted the entire direction of the dreamer's life. Not because it sounded profound, but because it opened a door. And let's talk about confidence for a second. People think confidence means dominating the conversation. No. Real confidence is being calm enough to serve the moment. When you know who you are, you don't need to sound impressive. You need to be effective. You walk in with a mindset of contribution, not competition. You're not trying to be the loudest. You're trying to be the most helpful. And when you lead like that, people listen differently. They remember differently. Because you gave them something they could use, not just something they could clap for. That's how leaders move people, not through noise, not through hype, but through answers, through insight, through relevance, through empathy, through strategy. You don't need more powerful quotes. You need practical truths. You don't need longer speeches. You need clearer paths. Speak in a way that people leave saying, "I know what to do next." That's the kind of voice that echoes. That's the kind of voice that multiplies. That's the kind of voice the world is desperate for right now. Discipline your mouth. Leaders speak with purpose. Discipline is not just waking up early or sticking to a routine. One of the most overlooked forms of discipline is what you allow to come out of your mouth. You want to be respected like a leader, then learn to control your words like a warrior controls his sword. Because every word you speak is a seed, and depending on the discipline behind it, you're either planting growth or you're planting destruction. Leaders don't talk because they have something to say. They talk because there's something that must be said. That's the difference between noise and necessity. You ever seen someone ruin a relationship, a deal, or even their reputation? Just because they couldn't shut up, they had to get the last word. They had to respond to everything. They had to prove they were right. And in the process, they lost respect. Why? Because they lacked verbal discipline. You don't win arguments by speaking louder. You win influence by speaking wiser, and wisdom doesn't shout. It doesn't stumble. It waits, it weighs, and then it works. When a leader speaks, every word is a tool. That means you don't just speak from emotion, you speak from intention. You don't speak to release pressure, you speak to create direction. And sometimes silence is the most powerful direction you can give. Don't mistake quietness for weakness. The strongest people often say the least because they're too focused on the result to waste energy on the reaction. You don't owe everyone an explanation. You don't have to comment on everything. Sometimes discipline is knowing what not to say, when not to say it, and who's not worth saying it to. In your everyday life, think of how many moments could have been better if you just paused. That text message you sent in anger, was it worth it? That insult you dropped because your pride was wounded, did it fix anything? That gossip you shared to feel included, did it elevate you? Or did it just reveal your lack of self-control? Leadership starts at the lips. If you can't control your mouth, people won't trust your mind. You might be gifted, but your words can disqualify you faster than your talent can carry you. Discipline your mouth because your words either build your credibility or bankrupt it. Imagine a doctor performing surgery with shaky hands. No one trusts that. Now picture a leader who speaks without thinking, reacts without listening, and jokes without boundaries. That's verbal immaturity, and people don't follow immaturity. They tolerate it. They might laugh, they might nod, but they're not inspired. Respect is not built on volume, it's built on verbal accuracy. Have you ever watched someone who knows how to speak in a meeting? They don't rush to give their opinion. They listen. They study the tone in the room. They pick the moment to speak. And when they do, it's not long, but it's loaded. It's focused. It changes the atmosphere. That's the power of a disciplined mouth. Your voice becomes currency. People don't just hear you, they wait for you because they know when you speak, something meaningful is about to happen. I've seen people lose promotions not because of skill, but because of how they spoke under pressure. One bad reaction, one sarcastic outburst, one emotionally loaded rant, and they were labeled unstable. That's how fast it can happen. Your mouth tells the world what kind of leader you really are. Not your RA not your job title, not your followers. Your mouth. You want to grow and influence. Watch how you speak in rooms where people ignore you. Be intentional in places where you feel overlooked. That's where discipline is developed. You don't need a stage to speak like a leader. You need mastery over your emotions, your need to be heard, and your desire to always be right. When you master that, people will start seeking your opinion, even if they outrank you. Because wisdom doesn't need a crown to sound royal. It doesn't need attention to carry authority. Discipline also means you don't let your tongue betray your values. You can't preach patience and speak with panic. You can't claim to lead people and then tear them down when things don't go your way. You can't claim excellence and then use your words recklessly. Your speech must match your standards. You're either edifying or eroding with every sentence you speak. There's no such thing as a neutral tongue. You're building something or you're breaking it. In conversations, leaders don't just respond, they reframe. You can walk into a room full of complaints and chaos, and instead of feeding the fire, a disciplined leader shifts the energy. They say, let's focus on solutions, or what can we control right now? That doesn't come from motivation, that comes from mental discipline. And when your mind is trained, your mouth becomes strategic. Think of a teacher who inspires students, not by yelling, but by asking questions that make them think. Think of a coach who doesn't insult mistakes, but uses every error as a teaching moment. Think of a mother who doesn't scream in anger, but disciplines with calm strength. All of that comes from the ability to speak with purpose. That's what makes people feel safe, feel seen, feel led. Not the power of your tone, but the restraint behind your words. You don't have to always be talking to prove you're in control. Sometimes the most commanding thing you can do in a room is to hold your tongue, study the energy, and release only what adds value. That's how leaders speak. That's how people rise when they hear you. That's how respect is built without you ever needing to demand it. Because people don't follow noise. They follow clarity, stability, and discipline. Repeat power phrases that build identity, repeat power phrases that build identity. Why? Because every time you speak, you're not just using words, you're building walls or opening doors. You're not just communicating, you're constructing. And the most powerful construction project in your life is not your house, your career, or your business. It's your identity. Who you say you are becomes who actually are. And the truth is, most people are where they are not because of what others said to them, but because of what they kept saying to themselves. Your mouth is either a weapon that destroys your future or a tool that shapes it. And leaders, they know how to use it to design destiny. You want to know what separates average people from powerful leaders. It's the ability to repeat language that reinforces their identity, not their insecurity. Most people walk around saying, I'm tired, I'm not ready, I'm not enough, I'm so stressed, I don't know how. They speak like victims and wonder why they live like victims. But a leader wakes up and declares, I am focused, I am trusted, I am an answer, not a problem. I rise when others rest. I build when others break. Power phrases aren't empty affirmations, they are identity anchors. They're what keep you grounded when life tries to drown you in doubt. Let me tell you something about identity. The world will try to name you before you can name yourself. Your background will try to limit you. Your failures will try to define you. Your past mistakes will whisper lies like, you're always going to be like this, or nothing you do ever works. But a leader answers back with power phrases that fight back. That's not who I am anymore. I am not my past. I'm the architect of my next level. I carry peace under pressure. I attract clarity. I lead with courage. When you repeat who you really are long enough and loud enough, eventually the world starts responding to you differently. Daily life will test this. You'll face moments where fear wants to speak louder than faith. Your boss may overlook you, and the voice in your head might say, you're invisible. That's when a leader speaks back, I am essential. My value is not based on validation. You might fail at a goal, and your old self-talk says, see, I told you you're not built for this. But a leader says, I'm not finished. I'm still learning. I'm built for progress, not perfection. Repetition reprograms reality. The most dangerous voice in your life isn't the critic on the outside. It's the one you keep feeding on the inside. Have you ever watched an athlete psych themselves up before a big game? They repeat lines over and over. Let's go. You got this. You're made for this. Why? Because they know what happens before the play determines what happens during the play. Life is no different. What you rehearse becomes what you release. If you wake up every morning saying, this day is going to be hard, then don't be shocked when your day matches your mouth. But if you rise and say, I lead the atmosphere, I command peace, I walk in clarity, I bring order where others bring chaos, you start shifting the energy around you. You've got to train your tongue like a soldier trains their weapon. You don't wait until the battlefield to prepare. You program your words before the pressure comes. Leaders don't wait until they feel like it. They speak power phrases until they feel like it. They don't wait for motivation. They declare their mission. And when you do that long enough, you don't just sound powerful, you become powerful. Not because life got easier, but because your language got stronger. You don't react anymore, you respond with intention. I remember a woman who used to work in customer service. She was underpaid, overlooked, and overwhelmed. But every day, before she stepped into the building, she whispered to herself, I am excellence in motion. I am favor in human form. I am the most valuable person in this room. People laughed at her positivity. But 6 months later, that same woman was promoted. Why? Because her identity outgrew her environment. Her words created space for her next level. She didn't wait for the promotion to speak power. She spoke it until it showed up. That's what leaders do. They don't let the mirror or the media define them. They define themselves with phrases that lock in purpose, passion, and peace. You've got to speak your next level into the current one. Don't say, I hope I become a leader. Say, I already walk with the discipline, the energy, and the clarity of a leader. Don't say, maybe I'll make it. Say, I'm made for it. Delay is not denial, it's development. Don't wait for others to recognize you. Speak recognition over your own life daily, even in pain. A leader speaks identity. I'm hurting, but I'm healing. I'm not broken, I'm becoming. My struggle is my sculptor. I don't retreat, I reset. I don't panic, I pivot. This fire is not my enemy, it's my evidence. That's the language of someone who refuses to be defined by what they're going through. That's someone who understands that power phrases aren't hype, they're habits. And habits shape identity more than hope ever could. You don't need perfect circumstances to speak like a leader. You just need consistency. You just need to feed your future with the fuel of your mouth. Because if your mouth keeps speaking weakness, your life will follow. But if your mouth keeps declaring identity, power, peace, and purpose, then no matter what life throws at you, you'll rise with your voice leading the way. So let me tell you something that most people will never have the courage to admit. Your future is not in the hands of your boss, your partner, your past, or even your pain. Your future is in your mouth. Speak like a leader, and your life will begin to reflect leadership. Speak like a follower, and you'll keep chasing approval you were born to command. Because respect doesn't chase noise. It follows clarity, confidence, and consistency. It's not what they call you, it's what you answer to. You don't need to wait for the world to recognize you. Start recognizing yourself. Start declaring things you've never heard about yourself, because what you say is more powerful than what they say. I am chosen, I am focused, I am unshakable. I don't fold under pressure, I form under pressure. I don't just survive the storm, I learn how to direct it. That's how leaders speak. You don't just talk about the mountain, you move it with your words. Your voice must echo your vision. Speak it until it shifts the room. Declare it until your reality bends to match your belief. You must remember that the tongue has no bones, but it can break or build kingdoms. It can destroy a future or define one. The power is already in your mouth. You just haven't been using it correctly. Most people use their words to describe their situation, but leaders use their words to change their situation. Don't just say, well, say what you want to see. Don't say, I'm stuck. Say, I'm staging for a breakthrough. Don't say, I'm tired of being overlooked. Say, I'm preparing for a platform. Words are containers. Stop carrying trash. Stop carrying truth. You are not weak. You are not too late. You are not broken beyond repair. You are becoming. And everything you've been through was preparing your mouth to speak with weight. You didn't suffer for nothing. You suffered to speak from the scars. People don't follow perfect people. They follow people who can turn their pain into power, their wounds into wisdom, their loss into language that lifts others. That's why your story matters. That's why your voice matters. That's why you've got to stop talking like a victim and start speaking like a visionary. Remember the words of the greats. The two most powerful words in the universe are I am, because whatever you put after them will chase you and find you. So what are you calling yourself today? Are you saying, I am overwhelmed, I am not enough, I am afraid? Or are you rising up with fire in your belly and saying, I am unstoppable, I am prepared, I am walking into rooms designed for my next level, I am the solution wrapped in skin, I am purpose in motion? Speak it even if your current reality doesn't match it. Speak it until the world adjusts, because it will. This isn't hype. This is alignment. Your voice creates atmosphere. If the room feels heavy, speak peace. If the crowd feels cold, speak fire. If your life feels stuck, speak motion. You don't need permission to be powerful. You just need language that reflects your level. You want people to respect you. Then stop talking like a person who needs to be liked. Start speaking like someone who carries legacy. Leaders don't speak to impress, they speak to impact. They don't talk to be seen, they speak to shift. The weight of your words will always determine the size of your influence. Talk cheap, life small. Speak with clarity, live with dominion. Never forget this, you are always one sentence away from shifting your life, one sentence away from opening a door, one sentence away from unlocking peace, one sentence away from commanding respect. So be careful what you say when you're tired. Be careful what you declare when you're disappointed. Because the universe doesn't respond to your feelings, it responds to your focus. And focus is formed by repetition. You have survived too much to speak like you're still broken. You've cried too many tears to speak like someone who's weak. You've been prepared in private. Now speak like someone who's ready for public victory. Raise your voice, declare your identity, step into rooms like you belong. Because you do. Not because you're perfect, but because you've been processed. And when a processed person speaks, the atmosphere listens. So I'll leave you with this. Don't speak unless it improves the silence. And when you do speak, let your words carry so much weight that even your whispers sound like thunder. Speak like a leader, and watch how the world starts giving you the respect you stopped asking for.